Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, please turn off your cell phones or your tom-toms or whatever. Okay? We got a couple little housekeeping issue to do, and we'll get right into the public hearing after that. Tara, take the roll call, please.
Anthony Moranti.
Here.
Kim Connor.
Here.
Dennis Gagnon.
Here.
David Hardy.
Here.
Peter Lewis.
He's coming in the door.
I heard him. Neil Coleman.
Here.
Neil Zuckerman.
Here.
Wait till Peter gets here. We have the approval of minutes, May 16th, 2019, the regular monthly meeting. Anybody? Additions, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Big question, any correspondence?
Well, there's just all the letters for the HHR, which I
Okay,
think is
okay. We have a request for a return of escrow, Miranda L. Grimm Juby, for East Mountain Road South, and our attorney said that there is one bill outstanding. So if we can approve a return of escrow with that condition that that bill be paid, any motion to adopt with that?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
I just want to say something about the hallway and the megaphone property.
Want to get it cleared?
No. So, just so you all know, this building, the way it works, if you're in that hallway, it works like a megaphone. So anything you whisper in that hallway, we can hear up here. So if you want to talk, you'll have to leave the building for it to be private.
All right. I'm going to read the public hearing notice for the Hudson Highlands Reserve.
Or do you want to read that?
I'm going to read this. That's much longer. It said basic information. It's a 210-acre tract on 6 separate tax parcels located on the east side of Route 9 between Horton Road, East Mountain Road North. And the rest of that particular paragraph just gives you the location details. It's in an open space overlay district, and the most westerly part of the tract is frontage along Route 9 and located in an industrial manufacturing zone. The remainder of the property, 4.5 acres, is located in the highway commercial zone along Route 9. The application for preliminary approval is being processed as a conservation subdivision pursuant to the standards contained within paragraph 17520 of the zoning ordinance. A minimum of 154 acres of the overall tract is proposed to remain undeveloped and protected as open space. The applicant seeks preliminary approval of a subdivision that includes 25 residential lots, each containing approximately 1 acre. 25 lots will be served by individual wells and community wastewater treatment facilities. An equestrian center is also proposed. The 4.5 acre parcel, which is improved with office building will remain a separate but smaller lot, making room for the proposed access road. And that's the abbreviated but essential part of the public notice. I do want to make a couple statements about conduct of the meeting. And on May 16th, the Planning Board determined that a draft environmental impact statement was complete for public review and comment. The DEIS examines the nature and extent of identified potential environmental impacts as well as steps which can be taken to minimize or avoid adverse impacts. Written comments will be accepted until July 8th to the Planning Board. The Planning Board extended this period of written comments beyond the minimum 10 days. All who wish to speak must sign up with your names, addresses, and any affiliations. We're going to give the project sponsor, when we finish with this, 5 minutes description of the process, of the project. This is not a question and answer period. You will direct all your questions to the Planning Board. All comments should be directed to the planning board. Comments should be limited to 2 minutes. Comments should be limited to the draft environmental impact statement. This meeting is being filmed and comments will be recorded by a stenographer. If your turn to speak, please step to the microphone and identify yourselves. And the microphone's up here and the camera's there. So we will start with any comment. What? Yeah, you want to get to it? Start first with brief comments from any of the board members if they want. Neil Zuckerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a couple of points, and these are directed at the members of the public. I'll try not to repeat things I've said before. As a planning board member, I draw on 5 areas of input to ultimately vote: the applicant's word, the code, our experts, my own experience and judgment, and the input of the public. You've had some input, but most of the airtime has been confined to the first 4. From those inputs in your first pass when we had you talk about a year and change ago, I arrived at and voted for a positive declaration of environmental impact with 3 explicit concerns supporting my vote that I expressed there and subsequently. Last month when we accepted this DIS, which does not mean agreement, I stated again my same concerns about this project's environmental impact and was validated with the project reps that no changes were offered in the submission that addressed my concerns. As I represent you, the members of this town, I'm here to listen to your voices again. We need your input. It is critical. This is our town. As board members, we are all from you. So please tell us what you think and how you feel. Please try to be objective, definitely be respectful, but most importantly, let your perspective be heard by me and my colleagues. On a slightly personal note, I have to leave at 9:45 tonight, so I will quietly walk out as I head to Philadelphia tonight, but I just want to apologize in advance to anyone who sees me slink out at that time. Thank you, sir. I never slink out. Yeah, I'm loud.
Dennis?
No comment.
Neil?
No comment.
Kim?
I have some questions, but I'm going to wait and see if the public comes up with them first.
Peter?
I'll do the same as Kim.
Dave? No. And I want to get into it. Next 5 minutes or less, the applicant will give us a brief description of the project.
You want me to keep going with that too?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Richard O'Rourke. I am an attorney with the law firm of Keenan Bean, PC, and I represent the property owner and person who is his chief architect, Ulysses Lisiaga, who's here and who has the vision for this subdivision. We have a very limited time to explain the project, so I'm going to keep my remarks remarkably brief. Because the concept is, as you said, to hear from the public with respect to those comments and the questions that they have regarding the document that's the consideration of tonight's meeting. The books that are considerable are here. They've been available to the public for some time. They shall remain available to the public at the library and other locations. You will see that a great deal of study has gone into and has been done with respect to this property, all of which is necessary when you are proposing a project that is setting aside so much open space and attempting to develop a quality subdivision and equestrian center. The proposal is for there to be a community of what could be termed green homes, which means that the homes shall be built to the highest standards in terms of environmental sensitivity and to complement the natural landscape, all to be developed alongside a carefully planned state-of-the-art equestrian facility. The homes are not limited only to owners who intend to board the horses at the equestrian facility, but are targeted for those that envision using this property for seasonal use and of like-minded residents who intend to encourage and maintain the ecological value of this property. The remaining 159.8 acres are to be left untouched and preserved as open space by legal instruments that will keep it as undisturbed open space in perpetuity. According to the conservation analysis previously prepared, the land intended for the preservation is of high ecological and conservation value and will be protected and will maintain the natural integrity for native species that inhabit the land. Because there are some misunderstandings and misconceptions as to what is proposed, including the access points, the proposed development, the resulting impacts, our consultants will provide a very brief review of precisely what is proposed, what the project benefits are, and why we believe this project is not only good for the community, but also for the environment. We are creating opportunities for recreation and a quality development, and the analysis that has been undertaken provides a framework of protection and quality development that will ultimately benefit the community on a much larger scale. We apologize in advance because the format of this public hearing and the regulations of SECRA do not allow us to answer your questions this evening. By law, your questions will be answered in writing as part of the process. So we apologize again for not giving the answers tonight, but we will be responsive in accordance with the law, which will require the questions posed this evening to be answered in writing in what is called the final environmental impact statement. Thank you very much, and Steve Gross, our consulting planner, will quickly take us through.
I'm Steve Gross, principal of Hudson Highlands Environmental Consulting. I'm going to face you rather than the board. The board's already familiar with this project. I'm going to try to give you a quick orientation for those of you who may not be as familiar as some who have been analyzing this project from the start. Yes?
1 minute.
1 minute?
You used 3:40 already.
I'm going to beg for more time. I can't orient these good people to this project that quickly. But this is a conservation subdivision. Briefly, what that means is that it's a design that takes into account the environmental constraints and the environmental benefits or the features of the property to come up with the design. What we started with was a conservation analysis that looked at all of the natural resources that were on the property and the constraints and mapped them out, and we came up with a map here that you see color-coded. Those areas that are the darkest are what was determined to be high conservation value, the yellow is medium conservation value, and the blue is the lowest conservation value or potential development area. And this was decided on a few factors, like, for instance, this is where there's a stream and wetland system that comes through the property, flows into Omar Pond, flows out of Omar Pond through a state wetland, and then further it wraps around, flows into the Clove Creek. Clove Creek comes around this way, and this is where we have the Clove Creek on the property itself. This is also the area where we found the highest natural native vegetation, where there has been no development in the past. There was a historic road that went through the property this way, and there's some existing structures that were on the property down here and also up here. And this is an area that had been, over the centuries, subject to some previous occupation and development. The flattest areas of the site are also in this blue area. We have steep slopes here, 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 and so we were trying to avoid that. So the development was planned to avoid the constraints, avoid the steep slopes, preserve the most highly beneficial parts of the property, the most ecologically sensitive parts of the property, especially the wetlands, the wetland buffers, the pond, and the native areas of native vegetation, high-value wildlife habitat. We have a lot of invasive species in the area that had been previously subject to development, and so the area was clustered. The development was clustered into these areas.
We have to cut it. We have to cut it.
I'm trying to help the public.
If you go over, everybody's gonna.
Yeah, we gave you an extra minute. I know DEIS has been out and available. It will continue to be available. So we want to get the speakers here. Sorry.
Okay.
We can't manufacture time. Anything the board wants to do beforehand? All right, we'll start with a sign-in sheet calling the first people. We have the sheets in the order in which they were completed. So number 1 is Linda Ann Ewan.
I'm only first because I got here early. I don't really represent anyone but myself, but I am vice chair of the Philipstown Aging at Home organization, and I'm a member of Glassbury Court, which is a neighbor of this development. And I just wanted to clarify, because through all of this, it's been very confusing. The first thing I want to say is Michelle Smith wrote an absolutely wonderful article in the paper, and I want to thank her. And those of you who did not read that article should look at that for sure. The second is the point that they are applying for a conservation subdivision, and that means they must have a conservator, an organization that says you have played by the rules and we will make sure you continue to keep playing. My question, one, to the board is, it is my understanding that the Highland, Hudson Highlands Land Trust did not accept the proposal as it was given to you, which means they have serious questions about whether this is indeed a conservation subdivision. My second question is 40 horses is a lot of horses. Now, according to the zoning regulations of the town of Philipstown, each horse requires an acre. If you own a horse, you have to have it parked on an acre. And it's not 40 acres and a mule. I want to know if there's 40 acres set aside for the 40 horses who will poop and pee. And that's a lot of consideration, those of us who are going to live nearby. So those are my two main concerns. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I'm going to ask, if you would hold off the applause as the speakers finish so we can have the next one. Nat Prentice is next. And standing by afterwards will be Susan Anspach.
Good evening, everybody. My purpose in coming is just to remind you about the relevance of the comprehensive plan to this particular proceeding. My name is Nat Prentice. I live in Garrison. I am currently serving as the coordinator of the town's Comprehensive Plan Update Committee. I was also a member of the special board that back in the years 2001 to 2006 wrote the existing comprehensive plan, so I'm familiar with it, and in fact, I never leave home without it. Just this is a quick reminder. I mean, you know what it is. It's a statement of community goals and sets out a conceptual roadmap as to how to achieve them. It's not the law. But in fact, it does provide a backbone to the law in very concise and unambiguous language. When the law, in this case, the open space development zoning law, becomes subject to a variety of interpretations as it has in this application, I believe that there's an opportunity to go back to a comprehensive plan and see what it says about open space development, particularly when this law is being interpreted for the very first time in the history of the town. So amongst the things that the comprehensive plan says about open space development, I'm going to read from Chapter 3, Section R, capital letter R, 2.4. Allow open space, cluster development with safeguards to ensure that such developments do not lead to more development than would otherwise occur, and that they preserve open space that the town wishes to protect. I'm just going to repeat one of the clauses. With safeguards to ensure that such developments do not lead to more development than would otherwise occur. Now, I don't understand as much about this application as you do, but my interpretation is that because we're in the open space overlay loan, that the applicant, if they were doing a conventional application, would have an opportunity to build 10 houses. This plan calls for 25 houses and calls for a commercial equestrian center capable of housing 40 horses. Houses. Okay. Good.
Okay, but I really want to clap for that one.
No, you don't. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Glenn Lowry will be up next.
My name is Susan Ansbach. I live at 516 East Mountain Road South. Members of the Planning Board, having attended most of the public hearings held on this proposal, I've seen a number of recommendations that would permit development, but on a scale that's consistent with the limits of the site. However, this developer seems to think that by utilizing a conservation subdivision designation, which sets aside 159.8 of his 210 acres as undisturbed open space, he can develop however he wants, even if it's inconsistent with the character of the community or the intent of the regulations enabling such subdivisions. Accordingly, none of the suggestions from the public were accepted in the draft EIS, and thus no changes were made to the initial proposal. As you've heard previously or read in written submissions, there are many concerns that should stand in the way of this project going forward as is. However, at this late date, what is even more revealing about the intentions of this developer is his duplicity in addressing the required traffic study for this project. When neighbors objected to access being on the windy and narrow roads of Horton Street and East Mountain Road North, the developer was quick to claim that those roads would only be in cases of emergency and access to the project would be directly from Route 9. Apparently, since 2014, the New York State DOT has been asking for details regarding this proposed Route 9 access. After the 2018 scoping sessions, the DOT raised a number of issues. To date, those DOT concerns have not been addressed. And to quote from their June 7th, 2019 letter to the Planning Board, and I quote, "Therefore, under 6 NYCRR Part 617 of SECRA, as an involved agency, we are unable to endorse the DEIS for this project." In conclusion, since this is Philipstown's first conservation subdivision, we need to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Please. Glenn Lowry. You're a hard bunch.
Good evening. I'm Glenn Lowry.
Next would be Eric Flynn is up next. Mr. Lowry.
And appreciate the opportunity to address you. My wife and I live at 130 Horton Road, which puts us as direct neighbors to this development. We are not against development at all. We actually believe an intelligent and sound land management program that includes housing and potentially a stable is viable. What we are deeply concerned about is the scale of the equestrian center. Just draw your attention to the idea of a 40-horse barn with all of the attendant outbuildings, parking, circulation, waste removal in the middle of what is already a beautiful environment that's about to be further protected with an easement. It would be like putting a factory or a gravel pit on Main Street. The scale makes no sense. And we are deeply concerned that this will have a negative impact, not just on our immediate environment, but on Clove Creek, on the nature and natural habitats that are there. And we just call your attention to the scale of this proposed equestrian center and would urge you to go and walk that land and imagine what all of that waste removal is going to look like and how it's going to function and the scale of this barn and the horses involved. I don't have the sense of humor of our first speaker, but I can assure you that we are as concerned as she is by the impact that that is going to have. Thank you.
Jocelyn Apicello, or Irv Flynn, I'm sorry, Irv Flynn, and then Jocelyn Apicello is next.
Thank you. I'm Irv Flynn, a resident of Garrison, and I'm here tonight particularly because yesterday our state legislature enacted the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which the governor has now signed into law. As you know, there's a scientific consensus that continued emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases caused by human intervention in the natural order will result in catastrophic climate change, the new law sets our state's goal at net zero for such emissions by the year 2050. We are here this evening, of course, to consider the environmental impacts of a proposal to build 25 houses on what is essentially undeveloped forest land abutting a pond and fishing stream. This project is not designed to provide needed affordable housing for full-time residents of our community. Who is it designed to attract? Apparently well-to-do New York City families seeking second homes, many of whom will likely drive back and forth on the 50-plus miles each way in cars emitting exhaust from gasoline engines. And when they're here, they won't be walking across the street to Food Town for their groceries. There will be 25 additional gas-emitting cars driving into town seeking space in the Food Town parking lot. How will their new second homes be heated? Their city homes, by the way, will likely remain heated while they're up here. With oil, propane, maybe electric heat pumps, I hope. And if it is heat pumps, where will they get their cleanly generated electricity? There's nothing in the site plan indicating a solar array.
Sorry,
Sorry?
the 2 minutes is up.
Okay. Thank you.
Jocelyn Apicello. DJ Baker is next.
Good evening, thank you. I know this has been a long process, years in the making, and I'm standing up here after such a long time, but I really felt compelled to come have my voice heard. My name is Jocelyn Apicello. I live in Garrison. I run a farm. I have a small nonprofit called the Ecological Citizens Project, and I'm a volunteer on the Climate Smart Community Task Force. The precedent that could be set here by allowing a, quote, conservation subdivision has really compelled me to make my voice heard tonight as a professor of public health who considers housing and land use decisions as paramount to the public's health and particularly to the health inequities we find in our society today, but also as a resident of Philipstown who's proud of this place and really encourages you and all of us to continue to be a positive model for a healthy, ecologically conscious lifestyle up here in New York State. The truth is, this region of the state is poised to take in an increasing population as a result of predicted climate change displacement patterns. I encourage us to brace ourselves for this by continuing to conserve land and develop smartly. That is, to protect important forest and wetland areas that are known carbon sinks and will do more to pull carbon out of our atmosphere than we had ever realized, and to discourage the development of single-family detached homes on larger plots that cut off nature from other humans and wildlife, especially in open spaces that are deemed conservation subdivisions. A recent New York Times article just published reported that in most cities across this country, it's illegal to build anything other than single-family detached housing in roughly 75% of all land. This trend in detached, large-scale, single-family detached housing developments are a result of local zoning laws. The economic and racial segregation that persists in towns and cities across this country, it's not only a result of federal and private bank lending policies, but it's a result of local zoning and planning decisions. So I urge us and you to use your power as a local planning and zoning board to really make this conservation subdivision be what it's worth. The housing affordability.
Thank you. DJ Baker. Heidi Wendell is next.
Good evening. My name's Jan Baker. My wife, Suzanne, and I are longtime residents of Garrison. We support the right of private property owners to develop their property, but only in accordance with applicable rules and regulations. We think that the filing by the Hudson Highlands Land Trust is a superb commentary on issues that have been raised by Hudson Highlands Reserve. We commend the points raised by the Land Trust to you as the Planning Board. These are not easy issues. These are not simple questions. You have to balance the rights of the property owner against the welfare of the community the protection of water, the protection of wildlife habitat, the protection of vegetation. We believe it can be done. I think it's clear the Land Trust believes that it can be done, but it will take a lot of thought and effort and, frankly, compromise by the proposed developer. It's going to be critically important as to who holds the conservation easement. It's going to be critically important how the community monitors compliance, and it's going to be critically important what the enforcement remedies are. We've got a lot of confidence in you as the planning board. We think you can get it right. We think this developer has the talent, the ability, and the resources to work with you to get it right. And for the sake of the residents of Philipstown, we urge you to do so and appreciate your time and effort. Thank you.
Heidi Wendell. And Celia Imre is next.
Hi, my name is Heidi Wendell, and I'm a newcomer to the area, which I know makes me a questionable occupant of a house here. But I wanted to express the view of a newcomer. I moved here for the hiking and the beauty of this area, which is so famous historically, and frankly, I moved from 114th Street, New York City, and I think this area is well known for its unbelievable beauty, for the hiking opportunities. Look at all the young people getting off the train every weekend at Cold Spring and Garrison for the hiking, and I would like to say that to call this subdivision a conservation subdivision is extremely unfair to that new generation of hikers and nature lovers, and it sends the wrong message to people like my 28-year-old daughter and her boyfriend who love this area for its beauty and its historic properties. And I think in addition to being extremely important to have the first conservation subdivision truly be a conservation subdivision with the qualities that Michelle Smith discussed in her perspective in the PCNR. It's also important to remember that ultimately it will greatly reduce housing prices and the value of properties in this area to have this type of subdivision and turn this area into a suburban community when it has such unique properties that are so important to the housing values and property values here and to its fame and its prominence historically. And I beg that consideration to be made in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Celia Imre. And next will be Crystal Ford. Is that right?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Celia Imre. I live at 62 Horton Road. I've been there for 18 years. I would like to ask my question first, since I might run out of time, and I'll describe the reason later. I would like to understand whether or not it's possible to have a proper set of accountability and responsibility for any type of environmental project going forward in Philipstown. And the reason I'm asking is that Glassbury Court was put into my neighborhood in 2009 with a lot of opposition from our area. We neighbors collected together to oppose it, and it's been put in as a conservation. However, when I first got into my home in 2001, I couldn't even step into Cove Creek without being nibbled by trout. There were turtles everywhere. There were bats in the sky at night. There were so many night noises that we would be woken up. And I have to say, sad to report that the natural habitat in my home at 62 Horton Road, right across the street from this development, is so depleted. In the last 18 years, I've been calling the Department of Environmental Conservation to ask if someone can come and make a report. I've gotten a permit to stock my stream with trout because I'm so disturbed at how few there are. And I'd like to ask the Planning Commission to please do a follow-up report for Glassbury Court on the environmental impact that's been done in our area already. I'm downstream. I'm really worried about this project for the same reasons that we can't really necessarily measure. Glassbury Port was supposed to be fine. Turns out it might not be fine. So I'd like to ask the planning board to please consider a rigorous accountability for any agreed proposal for the properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal Ford. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crossed out names. I have then the next person would be Madeline McGinley.
I'm Crystal Ford. I live on Garrison Woods Road. So I'm concerned about a couple of things. One of the things I think about is obviously water quality. I would like to know how up-to-date the flood zone maps are. As we have a warming world, we're going to be wetter. We have had the wettest spring I can remember. And as we get more rain, I'm thinking about all the horse manure flowing, all of the septic systems overflowing. We have septic systems overflowing into the Hudson. How do we make sure we don't have it overflowing into Clove Creek? I think about how is pesticide fertilizer use going to be strictly monitored. And I also think about how the horses will impact the wildlife. Are they going to be scared off? So those are just my concerns. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me just ask, Barbara or Glenn Ruxtall, are you here? Because the names are crossed off. Okay, so this would be Madeline McGinley?
I have been living on East Mountain Road North for 16 years. I would like to focus on the traffic safety issues associated with access to the site. First, I would like clarification on exactly where the main access point will be and if it has gotten approval from the DOT. Second, I would like to know if a traffic study has been submitted to the DOT. I know I speak for many of my neighbors for whom safety is a priority when I ask about a traffic study. But I don't just speak for my current neighbors, I also speak for the safety of any potential future neighbors who might live at the proposed Hudson Highlands Reserve. I also speak as a victim of a very serious car accident at the intersection of Route 9 and East Mountain Road North, which is currently shown as a proposed access point to the site. Last summer, I was waiting on the southbound side of Route 9 to make a left turn to go home onto East Mountain Road North. My car was rear-ended and totaled by an 18-wheeler tractor-trailer going over 50 miles an hour, and I was spun into the oncoming traffic. I suffered trauma and serious injuries, and the police said that I am lucky to be alive. The police also mentioned that accidents happen at that spot all the time. But the point is not my accident, it's everyone's safety who travels up and down Route 9. I would hope that our planning board demands submittal of a thorough traffic study for review by the DOT. I would hope that the applicant would provide mitigation given the additional traffic that the proposed project would generate. Solutions such as a turning lane, flashing lights, or reduction of speed limit along that section of Route 9 need to be looked at. I would ask the board to address 2 letters it received from the DOT. In the first letter dated June 20th, 2018, the DOT deemed the direct access off of Route 9 to the development as, quote, not necessary, because there are access points on East Mountain Road North and Horton Road. So which is it? It's already hard to get in and out of those 2 roads. Further traffic and horse trailers would worsen the bottleneck and increase hazards on a road which is already part of the Haldane School bus route.
Sorry, 2 minutes. Sorry. Michelle Smith. And after Ms. Smith will be Robert Weisholz.
Hi, Michelle Smith from Hudson Highlands Land Trust. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. 2 days ago, we submitted a 25-page report with our comments on the DEIS. In 2 minutes, I don't have time to go through all of that. I'll just summarise our 3 main concerns. They have to do with wildlife, with the definition of open space that's conserved, and with the homeowners association and the equestrian facility management on environmental impacts. On the wildlife, we hired our own experts. We believe that there's shortcomings in the wildlife studies that need to be remedied. We also believe that there is not sufficient mitigation of impacts on New York species of special concern, that those are species that have been declining in population across the state. Then on the definition of open space and consistency with the zoning code, you'll see that the conserved open space is actually split into 2 different segments that are disconnected, so they're not contiguous. They cut off a wildlife corridor, they constrict another corridor, and also the conserved open space includes the 11-acre equestrian facility, which is fully developed and therefore doesn't really have any residual conservation value, and therefore we don't think it should be included in the conserved open space. And then finally, I think we can't underestimate the impact that the Homeowners Association and the Equestrian Facility Management have on the future environmental impacts. The governance of those organisations will drive what happens with water, with Clove Creek, with the Clove Creek aquifer, and if anything goes wrong with them, if they get into financial difficulty or have problems in their governance, that will have an adverse impact on the environmental impacts of this project, and there needs to be mitigants for that. Finally, I'll just finish and say that we're very concerned about the loss of biodiversity locally and globally, and the planning board is, I know this is a difficult task. We want this project to work. You are on the front lines of ensuring the future of biodiversity in Philipstown, and we hope you'll take this information very seriously. Thank you.
Robert Whitesall?
No, I'm not going to speak, Tony.
Okay. I can't, Scott Silver? And the next one will be Hank Osborne.
Thank you very much. As you said, my name is Scott Silver. I'm the new director of the Constitution Marsh Audubon Sanctuary and Visitor Center. I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. A couple of things I have a couple of questions and then a comment. My one question is, what are the safeguards that are in place for eliminating or minimizing any impact of equestrian trail riding within the center once everything is built and you have 40 horses on the land generating approximately 1 ton of manure and urine a day? The impact on the surrounding areas will also be very great. The other thing I wanted to say was I wanted to commend the board for the open space zoning law, and I would ask that you respect the spirit of the law as well as the letter of the law when making your decisions. I understand it's difficult. We are very concerned with the loss of biodiversity as well, and I understand the big problem is that it's always a one-way street. We make these mistakes. We don't have a chance to go back and do it again, so what I would request, and I expect that you would be diligent in your decision-making. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hank Osborne. And follow-up will be Lynn Rogoff.
Can I submit copies of the use analysis? My name is Hank Osborne. I work for the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. We work to protect trails from erosion and protect them from overuse and improper use and protect them from various other threats. Have you ever been to the top of a mountain and seen a beautiful view that featured a single blemish in the middle of nature? The Hudson Highlands Reserve Project site is directly east of one of the most popular parks in the state, the Hudson Highlands State Park. The park includes the #1 most popular day hike in North America, Breakneck Ridge. From the top of the ridge, there's an amazing view to the east over rolling hills, over all of Fonstalk Park. There's nothing but green hills as far as you can see. There is some development along the Route 9 corridor, but it is all concentrated right along the road. All the hillsides above are completely undisturbed. The view is spectacular. You cannot tell where Fonstalk Park begins or ends. The proposed development would be seen from that viewpoint and every other viewpoint along the Fishkill Ridge and Schofield Ridge. There are a total of 11 viewpoints. All of them look directly east across the green hills. The proposed development would be the only blemish or scar in every one of those 11 viewpoints. The houses would be clearly visible from the trails. The equestrian facility would take up far less of the view than the houses, but at 160,000 square feet, it is the same size as a Walmart superstore, which is 170,000 square feet. The proposed development will damage the views and damage the trail experience. We at the Trail Conference created a viewshed analysis, and the data clearly shows that the development will not be hidden at all. And my question is that I ask that a genuine viewshed analysis be ordered. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Farrell will be next.
Oh, I thought you said Rogoff. No.
You are. You're up. You're up.
Hi, I'm Lynn Rogoff. My house is right there. I've been here for 30 years, and I was invited to come by certified letter. And what I want to talk about tonight is that I cannot believe that last winter we gave a detailed, extensive, dedicated feedback to the Hudson Highlands reserves. And it appears that rather than choosing to expand, they chose rather to expand the plan and gave short attention to our major concerns. And that it appears that that it was not important to them, and they chose rather to not to decrease the equestrian center or the number of houses. Now they have indoor swimming pools on their website as something that will go in the houses. And they continue to claim on their website, Hudson Highland Reserve, that people will not use the community schools, roads, and resources, but will spend millions to visit once in a while. Their plan is still for 40 horses. And now there are plans for commercial events and classes and manure machinery on their website. I reviewed their website, and it states, quote, "The central attraction to the development is the equestrian facility. We have determined the equestrian center, clubhouse, and padlock to compose the amenities package for the development, including a separate building housing a second indoor arena and spectator area. It now appears that they represent that this development will not use community roads, schools, and other resources such as our water, our light, our wildlife, our air. It does not make sense that people would pay millions of dollars and not use our community resources. Their representation appears to be greenwashing. And if you don't know what greenwashing is, you can look it up. Thank you.
Judy Farrell?
Andy, Judy is going to be back in 2 minutes.
Well, we'll go on to the next. Ray Warner? Ray Warner?
I'm Ray Warner. I live in Cold Spring, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. My family opposes this project. The study does not adequately address the effects of 25 houses on the wildlife corridors in the area, but we're most concerned with the 40-horse equestrian center. We think that this pushes it way over the top, and even if the houses were not too much, this would clearly be too much. We question whether it adequately addresses the effects the horses will have on the wildlife. We question whether the horses will be limited to the equestrian center or will be roaming through the other areas of the property, and what effect that will have, and whether there's anything in the plan that will prohibit that from happening later. And we also think that the plan does not adequately address the effect of the center on neighboring wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Farrell? Judy Farrell?
Yes.
And next is Carly Fraccaroli.
Hi, I'm Judy Farrell on the Philipstown Town Board, and I got my binder and read it from cover to cover. And it struck me on page 27, under A2, Public Need for the Project and Benefits, that the applicants did not discuss the public needs of Philipstown residents, but the needs of New York City residents, which was puzzling. And then on page 28, there's a lot of data from the American Horse Council on the economic impact of the equine industry. I love horses, but putting 40 horses alongside 25 new homes raises many questions that must be answered, and not just about the economic benefits. Again, on page 31, there's an analysis on the best places in the U.S. to buy an investment property. And again, it says that the weekenders are likely to purchase these properties, and they're good long-term investment. I just wanted to state that it also said a stabled horse produces 50 to 70 pounds of manure daily. So with 40 horses, that comes out to 2,800 pounds of poop a day. in our region. Again, it's a little vague on how that will be handled and the impact. I would urge that we consider the input and speak to, survey, have focus groups with the residents of East Mountain Road South, East Mountain Road North, Horton Road, and what they might see as an adequate public and community benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Carly and Mark Tabashnik is next.
Hi there, my name is Carly Fraccaroli. I am the Advocacy Associate at Scenic Hudson. I'm delivering this testimony on behalf of Jeffrey Anzavino, who is the Director of Land Use Advocacy at Scenic Hudson. As the first project seeking Planning Board approval as a conservation subdivision, your review of this proposal will be precedent setting. Excuse me. As proposed, the applicant's preferred alternative E is inconsistent with provisions in the Philipstown's Conservation Subdivision Zoning Code. Further, it would result in significant environmental impacts. Scenic Hudson believes that the project should be redesigned to be more consistent with the home siting of the applicant's alternative D. This relocates 5 residencies from the western side of Olmar Pond and clusters them on smaller lots. In addition, we believe that the equestrian facility should be reduced in size and laid out in a more compact arrangement, leaving a wider habitat corridor to the south. As proposed, Hudson Highlands Reserve does not adequately meet town code requirements for, nor the generally accepted definition of, a conservation subdivision. The large house lots sprawl across the entire western half of the property, dividing remaining natural areas into 3 separate sections, resulting in forest fragmentation, and would not protect the important habitat values found on the site. Scenic Hudson also disagrees with the applicant's assertion that removing the 5 homes from around the pond's west side and reducing impervious and disturbed area is inconsequential. Any reduction of impervious and disturbed area is relevant and consequential, and it would result in a smaller amount of lower quality edge habitat that would drive away species that rely on these large areas of contiguous forest. Any losses of habitat on this site are lost to some of the largest and most intact areas of forest habitat in the Hudson Valley. This area is within the Hudson Highlands Significant Biodiversity Area, as well as the Hudson Highlands Forest Block designation. A more concerted effort should be made to cluster this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a minute. I would just like to advise anyone who has prepared statements to submit them to the Planning Board Secretary, which will be included in the responses. So if you have had a prepared statement, even if it's the back of an envelope, give it to us. Okay, sir, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Tabashnik. I have a property with my family on East Mountain Road South. So I wanted to talk with the attorney for a minute, speak with him.
No, sir. Just direct it to the board.
Okay,
go back
pardon
and
me.
forth.
The attorney says that a great deal of study has been gone in this project. I disagree with that. I think that if you look into some of their proposals pertaining especially to the equestrian center, you'll see that in detail they want to set up a riding stable, a riding school, and a riding camp. They also want to focus their studies on this area of horsemanship called dressage. For those who don't know this, it's a very disciplined, it's a very expensive type of horse training, and it's not very well taken by most of the horse community in the U.S. Most of the horse communities, as we know, are just about riding. Professionally, they may be training racehorses or things like that. So to imply that there was a great deal of study into this means to me that they didn't look at the actual specifics of what they're proposing in their equestrian community. And in fact, what would be more likely, if I would suggest that you delve into, is that a zoning change to make this a more commercial activity rather than a residential activity would probably be more appropriate. If they wanted to go ahead and develop a commercial equestrian center, that probably would be something that would be separate from a residential. So trying to bring these two together does not fall under the scope of what the community probably wants of a residential facility. And if you change the scale, I think that it would probably improve the acceptance. Remember, we all try to live together, and if this is going to be a facility for everyone, I think has to be addressed that way.
Bill Sylvester, and next would be J. Parry Pitt for Bill Sylvester.
Hi, thanks. My name is Dr. William Schuster. Yep, that's right. I am a Cornwall resident, a professional ecologist, and have been executive director for 27 years of the nonprofit Black Rock Forest in the Hudson Highlands. In that capacity, I've studied extensively Highlands ecology, have published a book chapter on the subject, have used scientific knowledge and principles to manage the 4,000-acre Black Rock Forest for decades. I'm commenting on the DEIS prepared for the Hudson Highlands Reserve, proposed to become Philipstown's first conservation subdivision. This is a laudable concept and one that should help our communities live sustainably into the future while conserving natural resources, if implemented appropriately. To qualify as a conservation subdivision, the zoning code states such projects must preserve contiguous open space, must protect areas with the most conservation value, in other words, those habitats critical for maintaining populations of our native species that are of special conservation concern. My two concerns are, first, that the project as proposed fails to the contiguous conservation criterion by establishing a barrier dividing the conserved parts of the project area. And second, that the environmental studies to date failed to adequately address the local amphibian and reptile species of highest conservation concern and the habitats required by these species. These two problems should be addressed, first by accomplishing surveys of breeding habitats and species in the seasons necessary, particularly vernal pools during the April to May breeding season. There's no other way to know what species of concern are on the site. Wood frogs were found on the site, and these are obligate vernal pool breeding species. That means there must be vernal pools on site, but no appropriate search to locate and map these habitats has yet been accomplished in the March to April time period when they must be evaluated. The Philipstown community should know whether or not vernal pond requiring species of state-level conservation concern, like the marbled and spotted salamander, and other wetland requiring threatened species like the wood turtle are on site. The DEIS as it stands does not present appropriate surveys to draw conclusions on this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Karen is up next after Mr. Pitt.
Longer version. Hi, I'm Perry Pitt. I represent the Putnam Highlands Audubon Society with over 250 members in the area. We appreciate the thoughtful concern the Philipstown Planning Board is giving to the proposed Hudson Highland Reserve Conservation Subdivision project. In line with the town's adopted conservation goals in 2017, it is our position that DEIS wildlife assessment for this project does not include essential and sufficient monitoring procedures. The field sightings did not cover the breeding and nesting times for most species and did not cover a long enough period of time to establish the biological diversity of these lands support and what species breed and nest on the site. In the DEIS, the wildlife sightings and existing conditions are included with 4 field dates, visits on May 6th and 26th, July 9th and August 1st, 2015. 4 field study visits is simply too short a time span to conduct meaningful monitoring of birds. The absence of breeding bird surveys and counts for birds to determine they are not nesting have been omitted or not done. We ask the town planning board to consider this as a conservation project is the first of many. It must be the environmental model with real seasonal monitoring and assessments with environmental standards and limits that any future projects must also adhere to before any consideration to the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen. Yes, and Irene O'Garden is next. No, you're up now. We just said batter's box. Okay?
Good evening. My name's Karen Ertl. I'm a resident of Garrison. And on this evening, I want to remind everybody in the room that almost 2 years ago today, Town of Philipstown signed a Climate Smart Community Agreement. Just a few weeks ago, the county unanimously voted in a Climate Smart Community County. The agenda of that initiative is to look for ways to be smart about our climate and our development. And while I understand and accept that development is inevitable, and I want to commend the board for doing an environmental impact report, I think now the rubber hits the road. There are two bipartisan legislations in the state. I'll give you the numbers, I'll leave them with you. These two pieces of legislation would strengthen the protection of local wetlands and streams. Current DEC protection only covers areas that encompass 12.4 acres or more, and it has to be on a DEC-approved map. New York State is the only state without such corridors for small wetlands. More than 1 million species are at risk. This legislation would protect smaller wetlands, rivers, streams, creeks, lakes, and wildlife. So I encourage you not to hurry this project through, but to see what the state of New York is doing to protect our small wetlands. I want to also ask you to please understand that you are setting the precedent for what a conservation subdivision looks like in the town of Philipstown. We will be hearing from future developers, they did it then, we can do it now. We know that for a fact. So I just want to commend you for what you're doing, but I also want to caution you, we need to do it right the first time. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Galler is up next after.
Hello, I'm Irene O'Garden. I live in Garrison, but I know this land so well. I know this pond so well. I swam it. We were there for 12 years. I walked much of this property. I can tell you, as it says in the environmental impact statement, most of the observed wildlife is right around that pond. Kingfishers and geese and all of that. So one of the things I'd like to see happen is those 5 houses be removed from the west side of the pond and conserve what is irreplaceable. I fully support the Highland Land Trust's 8 recommended actions. I'm also concerned that, according to the page 3839, the critical of the environmental impact statement, the critical maintenance of the pond, stormwater management, wastewater, is going to be the responsibility of a homeowners association. So I looked this up, like what is a homeowners association? Well, it's essentially like a not-for-profit organization. People get elected to the boards. It's generally a volunteer thing. And I'm sure that people who live in New York City and have a second home might want to get really involved in the homeowners association, but they might just want to hire a management company, which plenty of people do, and it's very difficult to have any kind of legal proceedings against that. I looked it up on the New York Attorney General's website. So one of the things that makes the land so attractive is the land that my husband and I donated, 27 acres that's right next to it, that then became Clove Creek Preserve. So I just want to say that conservation can take place at any way. I say also, there's frequent mention in the statement about exotic and invasive species. Let us remember that humans, too, can be a pretty invasive species. Sustainable houses are a worthy goal. Let us sustain the habitats that surround them. Let us have our first conservation subdivision serve as a model for those to come after, because someday we will be absent. Our decisions will live on.
Thank you. Next one up after Mr. Galler will be Mickey Danaher.
Good evening. I'm Andy Galler. I'm a member of the Conservation Board, and I live about as far away from the project in southern Garrison as one can in town. So I've read the binder cover to cover, and I'm very familiar with the project. And basically, the intent of CEQA is very, very specific, and that is for the applicant, the developer, to work with concerned agencies and the community to balance environmental impacts with the effects that would happen on the economy and social aspects. And looking at the draft environmental impact statement, I was exceedingly disappointed. If you compare it, and I'm going to ask the planning board and their experts to focus on this tremendously, is to take the scoping document and then look at the draft environmental impact statement. And I think what you'll find is huge areas of deficiency, old data, questions not asked, and alternative plans cherry-picked so they're not really realistic. Number two, I want everybody to look at the economics of the project. The housing market is flat, and it's probably going to remain flat, not so much because of the economy, but we no longer have the $10,000 deduction, and millennials really don't want houses. So all of a sudden, we have a complex that has intense mitigation that needs to be kept up continually. What happens if only 2 houses are sold, or even only 10? Is this feasible? Who's going to take care of it after that? I really ask the planning board and everybody else to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. After Mr. Denneher, Matt Goldsmith will be next.
Mickey Denneher. The idea is not to say no, but how do we say yes? That's the whole idea. I'm here 18 years. I love Philipstown. I love how everybody takes care of it, and so do you. My concerns are also the scale and the concentration of the houses and the equestrian center. One of the things I've been thinking about is that equestrian center is an open to the public. So what's really the volume there? The houses, will they in fact become Airbnbs? What volume could be there? All right? We talked about a traffic study. The amount of accidents that have been happening lately are just too much. I mean, 9 gets closed down all the time. When we put that in, and then we talk about the manure. Manure is held on site for 14 days. That's almost 20 tons of, well, I won't say it, but we know what it is. And then it's got to be transported out. And then what happens if there's a problem online with that? So I asked the board again, and again to these guys here, we don't want to say no. We want to say yes. We want to see Philipstown go forward. But we want to see Philipstown maintain the beauty that everyone here believes in, and I know you do too. Thank you.
Matt Goldsmith, and then Goldie Green. Matt Goldsmith. Goldie Green. No? I thought she was here.
She's at the gas station.
Okay. Evan Thompson, and then after him will be John Benjamin. Too much, huh? John?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name's John Benjamin. I was born down in Butterfield Hospital about 74 years ago. So I'm somewhat local. I want to talk very briefly about manure and trout. And really, I know nothing about horses, but Rutgers University does. And I refer you to their study that the Rutgers Equine Science Center did, a document you can look at online. The document was labeled Horses and Manure, fact sheet number 036. I was astounded to read that the average 1,000-pound horse produces 10 to 12 tons of manure a year. I'm not saying this, they're saying that. Do the math, 40 horses, that's 400 to 480 tons of manure a year. It's also interesting that the state of New Jersey, at least, considers such large commercial equine centers to be concentrated animal feeding operations. CAFOs. You might know if you know anything about pigs or chickens, which are tightly regulated by the state in the hopes of preventing NPK nutrient pollution, as well as vermin and pathogen introduction into adjacent aquifers, wetlands, ponds, and/or streams. CAFOs are essentially feedlots. On the other hand, not knowing much about horses, I do know a great deal about trout and brook trout. I know a great deal about clean, clear streams and good fishing. I was born and raised in Garrison, and as kids we fished many of the small brooks, sometimes lucky enough to lure out a little brookie or two. As a guide in Colorado and as a Trout Unlimited member, my knowledge has grown over these 73 and a half years.
John, thank you. I read that. If you make sure that we get a copy of that.
I already sent it to you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Next, Adam Hurd. And then next will be Richard Batensky.
Ready? I'm Adam Hurd. I live at 63 Horton Road, and I'm actually a professional real estate developer. I've developed well over 4 million square feet, and I've actually never seen a project get this far along without a traffic study. My understanding is that the state has denied the direct access to Route 9, and as we stand here today, we don't know how they're accessing the property. We talk about traffic and accidents on Route 9, but we also know that East Mountain Road and Horton Road are tight roads, 25 more homes and horse trailers in what sounds like a commercial facility on the weekends, and who knows what's going on here. So in my opinion, it really needs to sort of slow down. There needs to be a traffic study, and the access needs to be figured out before it could go any further. It's just a life safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Richard Butensky. You've all heard enough from me already, but I just want to go over a couple of things. The law says that an applicant may increase the permitted number of dwelling units by use of density bonuses granted at the discretion of the planning board. The applicant seems to think that they have a right to it, but it's at your discretion. The formula and the density bonus is as described shall not be considered an entitlement. That's what the law says. It is not an entitlement. It seems that some people think it is. Preserved open space must not result in fragmentation of the open space land in a manner that compromises its conservation value. It says that in the law. I think it's been compromised. The configuration of the open space land and dwellings shall not result in fragmentation of the open space land in a manner that interferes with its proper management and protection of its conservation values. The final determination as to which land has the most conservation value and should be protected from development by conservation easement shall be made by the planning board. It's not made by the developer. It's made by the planning board. That's in the law.
Eating into your time.
Excuse me?
So they're eating into your time.
There's an old joke. This guy prays to win the lottery every day. He prays and he prays and he prays, and he says, I'm a good man. Day and night, 3 times a day, prays. Finally, after years and years, he says, I'm such a good man. I'm a pious man. I do everything. Finally, he's there praying, and he hears a voice, and it's God. He says, "Meet me halfway. Buy a ticket."
Thank you.
They need to buy a ticket. This is they need conservation.
Thank you, thank you. Adrian Kumas, and next is Madeline Ray.
I'm here representing a family that has been indigenous to this area for 12,000 years. I'm co-director of Lenape Center, an indigenous organization. We've been praying on this mountain since 2005. We meeting elders coming from Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Canada, South Dakota, Arizona, New Mexico. And we know that this is a place of great sacral significance. This mountain should be left in peace. I'm part of an effort to bring the people home, the original people. We don't want this type of disrespect to continue anymore. It's time to respect what we have in terms of our responsibility to it and stop playing around with ideas of short-term thinking and short-term profit that only enhance the lives of maybe a minority and a few. We are all in this together, but at the end of the day, this is indigenous homeland. This is land that has deep spiritual, religious significance, and it must be left alone. Wanishi, thank you.
Thank you. Madeline Ray. And next will be Alan Brownstein.
Hi, good evening. My name is Madeline Ray. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak about the project. Can you hear me now? Hi. Okay. Thank you. When I first was looking into the LLC that is behind this project, I was taken aback that they didn't put their names to it and that it was a blind LLC. So I look at the architect, whose name is on all the filings, and his address matches the address of the LLC. It's the same one. It's in New York at 91st Street. And also, that address is shared with a construction company. So right now, I know who the developers are and who they are, because they're all living together or working together in New York City. And not that that's a crime or means that it shouldn't be done or developed, but it seems to me that these people can move this development anywhere. The cons tonight outweigh the pros. They live in New York City. They're just looking for a place to put an equestrian subdivision. Equestrian subdivisions are the latest fad in subdivisions in America. California, Texas, Florida, the Carolinas. Golf subdivisions are played. They're saturated. So now they're doing subdivisions with horses. And these are first-time builders of this subdivision. You go on the architect's website, there's not a 25 one-acre home development on the site. The construction company, there's not a 25 home, 1 acre development. There's not an equestrian center. The architect says on his site that he is the general contractor of all of his projects, which include homes, interiors. So I don't know how this is our first project, and it seems to me we have to trust these first-term developers who are just looking for a fad. They're just developers to make money, promising us a lot of tax dollars. What if this development turns into a 501c? Does that have an implication on our tax dollars? I don't know. You all don't have a crystal ball, but I will say you have the responsibility to pass the baton as stewards to the next planning board people. Thank you.
Alan Brownstein, and next is Mike Casale.
Good evening. My wife Patty and I moved here in 2015 after we decided in 2005 that we were determined to move here. And we live in Glassbury Court, which is less than 1 mile from the site. And we live there with nearly 200 other residents. And I don't know all the views of whether the residents of Glassbury Court support or oppose this project, but I do know that there is considerable concern. And that concern, I noticed as I walked in here tonight, the number of people from Glassbury Court who are here. Would you please raise your hand if you're from Glassbury Court?
Please.
And, okay, thank you.
Keep it this way.
But my point to the board is that there's a large community here where there's considerable concern about the decision that is being made. The expertise that is here and the process that is going on here is excellent, and it's important to avoid a mistake with this decision, because once a mistake is made, it cannot be undone. And I just want to close by asking if people know the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. And the answer is simple. The pessimist has better data. And I think it's important, and I'm impressed with how many of the questions that are being raised are data-driven, and I'm looking forward to a good decision by this planning board. So thank you.
Thank you.
I make a motion to request any future speakers to end their commentary on a humorous joke or anecdote.
And you don't have to leave early. Mike Cassell? David Gordon? Mike Cassell? David Gordon? No? And our last speaker is Ann Hammond. Oh, David. I'm sorry, Ann. Miss Hammond, sorry.
Long way back there. Okay, thank you, and to the board for taking my comment, and thank you for holding this important review of the Hudson Highlands Reserve proposal. On the surface, the development of only 39 acres of a 210-acre site sounds ideal, but the devil's in the details, usually. There's a good reason that 171 acres were left undeveloped and are not going to be ever developed, and those acres tend to be on terrain that's too steep and too wet to be considered. The proposed development of 25 LEED platinum level certified homes and 40-horse barn dressage complex will effectively split the 210 acres in such a way as to preclude the natural and safe passage of any wildlife along this corridor. And poor old Clove Creek takes yet another hit of a magnitude that it can ill afford. Perhaps someone could explain the section in the draft environmental impact statement on page 14, section B.2.C, entitled Forest Fragmentation Impacts. Its concluding sentence states, quote, "There will be no true fragmentation, though there will be some habitat perforation." The use of the adjectives true and some seem to be quite telling. Sounds a bit like being a little pregnant. In conclusion, we here in Philipstown have more than 25 of these designated conservation subdivisions. Let us not lower the bar and set a poor example in this, the first test of this enlightened zoning mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Ann Hammond?
Yes. Hi, my name is Ann Hammond, and my family has lived on East Mountain Road South for the last 50-plus years. And I wrote you guys an excellent letter last year. I just reread it. It was great. What can I say? Not one point on it was addressed in the DEIS. Or anyway, nothing was changed in the plan, and I have also visited upon you a 7-page letter, so I won't repeat any of that.
Make sure we get a copy of it, please.
Yeah, I already did. I dropped it off yesterday and I emailed it 2 days ago. So what I realized is that one thing no one has mentioned, possibly someone has thought about it, but we've talked a lot about the tonnage of manure going out. Well, this is a completely unsustainable environmentally. This project is unsustainable. Everything those horses eat has to come in too, because they can't live on 11 acres. In fact, they're not even really allowed out. So we'll leave aside the fact that these are actually sensitive herd animals that need to graze for health. That's not the point of the DEIS, although it is, in my opinion, inhumane. But all of that food has to come in on great big trucks because they're not grazing out there on that land. So how many thousands of pounds of poop was going out? Well, just as many is coming in great big trucks on those 2 tiny little roads that you can barely get out of already, because we know now that the DOT is not letting them out on Route 9. I think there's a lot that has yet to be considered about this project, and I don't like how casually all of the assumptions that it will all be okay are being made in the document. That's all.
Thank you. Stephen Loria?
Hi, my name's Steve Loria. I live in Cold Spring, Philipstown, East Mountain. I just first wanted to make a point that I did submit a letter back in February of 2018. I just want to resubmit those same comments. I don't have the time it would take to restate all of the already made points from the Hudson Highlands Land Trust in all of their public comments, letters, and points made against the project. However, I am in complete agreement with those arguments that are made, and just like to state that. I also want to highlight the points raised by other concerned citizens here in Philipstown, including the individual from the New York State Trails Conference and the impact on our views. I think that's really important to consider. I also support the comments made tonight about how this project is completely inconsistent with the Philipstown Comprehensive Plan and existing code related to the subdivision. This project will set a horrific precedent on future developments to be considered under that. Several other points that I just want to also reiterate are the deleterious impact on our water aquifer, as well as the amount of water the project will be consuming with 25 houses and 40 horses. The numbers mentioned are astonishing. The manure that those horses would produce is also a significant reason not to allow this development as is. The traffic situation and how the DOT comments will be addressed, I'd like to know. I'm very concerned that if the decision is to move access to East Mountain Road North, because I understand access from Route 9 is not an option any longer, how that will create a more dangerous situation already that exists. For those people that are making left turns on East Mountain Road North from Route 9, it's already really dangerous. Cars are passing you on the right, and they're hitting people. It's extremely dangerous for me to make that left, and all of our neighbors to make that left turn, and it really needs to be considered. So will this board, if it allows that type of access, will it consider and take responsibility for the accidents that may cause? Thank you.
Before we finish, one of our advisors from AKR, Aaron, will tell us how we proceed further.
Sure. So if there's no more speakers?
Not on the list, no.
Well, there's a guy over here.
Oh,
I apologize, I didn't see the list when you come in.
Will you come over, state your name?
Can I take the 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
What is your name?
My name is, I apologize for cutting into the gentleman's time. My name is Craig Mashesky, and I live at the very bottom of the proposed plan of where the road would enter. In purchasing my home 2.5 years ago, I had no idea, no plan There is no sign, there is no proposal that there would ever be 25 homes and an equestrian center across from the 9 acres of property that I purchased. Nor would I have put my family's life savings into a home that was abandoned, essentially, to know that suddenly 25 homes would be across the street from me. But that being said, in our first year there, we called the sheriff's department, and 45 minutes later, someone showed up. Has Philipstown or Putnam County put any plan in place for fire, additional police, ambulance, or anything to assist these homeowners? Because at the moment, when you call, it's all volunteer for the fire. The sheriffs are very stretched, and the ambulance are also volunteer. And my last point is, have we thought about the mental health of the people of this community? The noise, the traffic, the anger that this will bring upon the people who live within that area. We really have to think about the mental health of what people will feel, the stress on the road. They're constantly being bombarded by trucks and the sound of chainsaws every day, drilling, all of that noise. I really take that into consideration. And there was a reason that all these people pointed out several things here. The law. The law is in place to protect land and what you're hearing. Those laws were written for reasons, and you're here to uphold those laws, and I really hope you do.
Yeah. Now, our advisor from AKRF, Aaron Warner, will tell us where we go from here.
Can you hear me okay? On the camera too? Okay, great. I just wanted to point out, because a lot of stuff was raised about the DOT comments. So in addition to the public comments that we're hearing tonight that are coming in written form as well by the July 8th deadline, the DEIS was also circulated to the interested and involved agencies after it was accepted last month. And so far, there's been the DOT comments again that just came this month, requesting some additional information from the applicant's traffic consultant, among other items. Since these comments came from an involved agency, the applicant is required to address those for the final EIS, and my understanding is that they have already agreed to do that. So as far as the next steps here, the July 8th deadline is for written comments. That will remain open. Once that is expired, all the comments that have been given tonight, which have been recorded by a stenographer, which are also on video and in written form, will be compiled by the applicant or consultants. They'll share those with the board's consultants for review prior to releasing them to you guys to review them for official release on preparing the FEIS. So at the July meeting, there should be a set of comments put together by the team, the applicant team, reviewed by the board's consultants first, given to you. And then at that meeting, you can officially release them to address those for the FEIS. Now, the FEIS, the SEQA regulations have a minimum 45 days from the end of the public hearing is when the FEIS should be filed, but that can also be extended under different circumstances should it be necessary. We'll have to see, at the next meeting if we need to do that. But for now, these comments will be all compiled and shared with the consultants first, and then we'll talk about them at the July meeting.
Okay, and all this will be ready for public review as of when?
So after the July 8th deadline, between then and the July 18th meeting, I believe it's the 18th is the next meeting,
yeah.
Those comments should be all put into written form by the applicant team, summarizing what's been heard tonight, what's been sent in writing. They have to categorize them by topic in the DEIS, and then those should be shared with the consultants. We will review those before giving you guys those before the meeting on the 18th.
Okay.
And then at the 18th, we'll review them all as a group and decide if you want to go ahead and give them the green light to go ahead and address those for the final EIS.
Okay.
Steve, is there anything you'd like to add on that one?
Thank you. First off, Andy, I'd just like to point out for everyone who spoke tonight, the board necessarily had to limit the amount of time because of just the great number of people who appeared. But as Aaron alluded to, The written comment period is open until July 8th. So if anyone had something that they wanted to say that they didn't get a chance to get out in their 2 minutes, or if they just want to reinforce what they said, you can submit written comments to the board up to July 8th. Just get a piece of paper, write down whatever you wanted, and your comments will be considered. Andy, what Aaron was speaking about as far as the next step is that in order to prepare the final environmental impact statement, the FEIS, the applicant has to put together every comment and question that has been raised and then address that in the document at the FEIS. So what's going to happen next is we're going to get a compilation of all the comments that you've heard, and you want to make sure that all the comments are included within it. So if there's something that's left out, you have to point out and say, oh, what about, I don't know, whatever it may have been, whatever issue that hasn't been covered. Oh, that has to be in the FEIS as well. And when you're satisfied that all of the comments, all the issues raised are in that, then you give them the green light to prepare the FEIS, and that's what's going to happen at next month's meeting.
One last, go ahead, Neil.
So that sounds like an odd process. The public speaks, the applicant writes down what the public said about the project, of which it was.
Well, the steno does, but.
Okay, but it's strange that this group of people says, I'm not going to characterize the comments, but we heard the comments. So these people are then going to write down what those people said about their project and come back to us and tell us that's what they said about their project?
No, they're going to address the comments.
Who's writing down the list of all the comments?
Well, they are.
That's what I'm saying. You're saying they're going to write down the list of all the things these people criticized about the
You're
comments.
going to have a stenographic record as well
Okay.
for review. I mean, you can see what's in it. So and then they're going to say these are all of the items, and you can see what was raised. And then they're not just going to say that's what was raised. That's the first step. The second step in preparing the FEIS is to address that and say, oh, this is where the issue of I don't know, manure's come up a lot. Manure. This is where manure is addressed in the DEIS. And here's additional studies or comments or whatever it might be that show that there aren't going to. Oh, madam, I already did. I said it's a final environmental impact statement. No offense, but I already did. FEIS. So that document we put together saying how those were addressed and why those potential environmental impacts are being mitigated and how they're being mitigated. But that's a step beyond what's going to happen in July.
Ron, is there anything, our engineer?
I mean, as described already by the consultants, all the comments received, both verbal and all written comments, are going to be assembled. That's going to be done through the planning board secretary and with the receipt of the stenographic record. And then formally, the board's going to submit that to the applicant and ask them to respond. So there's going to be a significant effort to put together all those comments to assure that the compilation is complete and then is formally transmitted from the planning board as lead agency to the applicant with the direction to respond to all comments raised.
Go ahead, Aaron.
We're giving the applicant the first crack at compiling the comments for review by the planning board, approving them, and then going ahead and addressing them for the final EIS after the July meeting.
Okay, any further comments from members of the board? Neil? No.
Kim, did they cover all your points? Or was there...
What happens then? July 18th, is that it?
No.
No, it's not. July 18th is when the board will officially release the set of comments for the applicant to address in the final environmental impact statement, which could take a while to develop. But in that document, there will be responses to all the comments raised. There will be responses to the DOT issues and any other involved agency comments that come in between now and July 8th.
Thank you. Kim?
I think I'm going to submit comments in writing.
That's fine.
The board is welcome to also submit
well.
comments by the July 8th, and the consultants are also going to have some comments as well.
Thank you. Make a motion to close the public hearing? So, anyone?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
When is the earliest date that a conclusion can be reached on this?
Stand up.
The mic, Peter.
We're not taking questions.
I just really have a brief question, which I'm sure everybody here is interested in knowing.
Talk into the mic.
I'm Peter Hoffman. I live in Garrison. Just When do you anticipate
We don't.
that there will be
don't.
a conclusion to these deliberations?
There is deliberation, that's why we don't conclude.
Okay.
I'm sorry we can't give you a more definitive answer, but.
Well, let me see if I can clarify just a little bit as far as that goes. Well, yeah, but getting aside from the track as far as the days go, the way that it works is the final environmental impact statement will be prepared by the applicant and submitted to the board. The board will consider it much like it considered the DEIS and determine whether or not to accept it, whether all the comments have been adequately addressed, all the issues were addressed within it. And then once they accept that, the board will go on to consider a document called a finding statement. And the finding statement is going to determine whether or not all of the identified potentially significant adverse environmental impacts have been mitigated to the maximum extent practicable, or if they haven't been, do you have to make changes to the plan in order for that to occur? Or if they can't be, whether the application should be denied because they're not. So the finding statement is, I think, the penultimate step before determination is made on this, and we can't give you a time as to when that's going to occur. We can tell you the process by which it'll be reached, but we can't say it'll be August or September or something like that. It's going to depend in large part on how soon the applicant turns around submitting the FEIS and whether it's complete once it's submitted.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. To close the public hearing. Thank you.
I'll make that motion.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
That was just for the public hearing. Are you going to close the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah. Do we have anything else left on the? Let them go.
Somebody.
No, we don't.
I'll make the motion that we close the meeting. All in favor? Aye.